So thank you all for joining us this evening. Really, thank you all for everything that you do to defend your investment and the investments of others against a relentless and predatory utility monopoly and craven regulators and politicians that enable them. You're doing the Lord's work for yourself, but also know that the work that you're doing to defend your investment pays dividends for your neighbors and others who either have solar or want to get it one day. So it's a real pleasure to just be working with you all. So this webinar will be about an hour. Cailey's going to go through just some housekeeping, but we're going to cover today some of the main things that we're working on. There's a lot going on, and we felt that it was important. Many people, we're working to stop a solar property tax. We're working to bring balcony solar to California. There are other things in addition to that. You've gotten many emails from us, and we thought maybe just so that you can see the big picture of just everything that's going on right now, that we ought to do a webinar. And so that's what we're going to do. And Cailey, why don't you just do some housekeeping and then we'll just get right into it.
Absolutely. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Cailey Underhill. I'm the Advocacy and Development Director of the Solar Rights Alliance. Thrilled to have you here. A couple of quick housekeeping things. First of all, I just want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded, and we're going to put the recording together along with some of the materials from this evening and send them out to everybody who registered for the webinar. So just want to say that right from the top. And then second, we are going to have a section at the end where we answer questions that folks here in the webinar would like to ask. So at the bottom of your screen, at the bottom of this Zoom webinar, you have a menu, and one of the options is Q&A. And you have an opportunity, if you click on that button, to type in your question. And what I will be doing is scanning those questions as they're coming in. And we won't be able to answer all of them because these webinars are attended by hundreds of people, but I'll try to answer as many as we can. I'll try to batch them together thematically so that we try to at least get at the spirit of your question. But if you don't hear your question answered, or you feel like we didn't answer it all the way, please send us an email at info at solarrights, RIGHTS, the name right there, .org. So that's info at solarrights.org, and we'll be sure to answer your question there. So back over to you, Dave.
Okie dokes. And I should say, I'm Dave Rosenfeld. I'm the director of the Solar Rights Alliance. And a little bit about Solar Rights Alliance that's worth just mentioning. We are the statewide association of California solar owners. We're a network of 150,000 people who have solar. We also welcome people who don't have solar but might want it one day. We believe that everyone has the right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference from the utilities or the government. We keep track of what the politicians, regulators, and utilities are up to, and then alert you when there's a threat to your investment or an opportunity to make solar more available to more people. When I say we, I really do mean we. We really are just a network of 150,000 solar owners from across the state. Cailey and I are the two paid staff people, but really we're here to serve you and give you the information you need so that you can make your voice heard. We don't represent you, you represent yourself, and you've been doing a darn good job of that. And so let's just keep that going. So let's just get into the meat of this whole thing so that there's enough time for questions. And so the first thing that I want to cover is we're going to work backwards from a couple of different things. We're going to talk about the net metering lawsuit, which many people have been asking about. We're going to talk about the effort to make sure that we stop the solar property tax. We're going to talk about the effort to bring plug-in solar to California. And then we're going to talk about most importantly, what you can do. Many of you have done a lot of things already, but there's always more. And so you will not be lacking for homework if that's what you're looking for here. We're an action-oriented group of people. But first, let's start with the NEM 3 lawsuit updates. You might be going, what's NEM 3? So let's just start there, in 2023, California changed the rules governing what happens when you put solar panels on your roof. And prior to April of 2023, if you went solar, for everyone that goes solar, you put the panels on your roof, or sometimes you have a ground mount, and those panels create electricity. And that electricity, first and foremost, powers the appliances and lights in your home. Sometimes those panels make more electricity than your home needs. And when that happens, that extra electricity flows out the wires to your neighbors, literally to your neighbors. It doesn't go much further than your neighbors. And it just goes to the first appliance or light that your neighbors are using. So it literally goes to your neighbors. And then Before these changes happened, before what we call NEM 3, you got a bill credit for that extra energy that you sent to your neighbors. It was roughly equivalent to what you would pay had you brought that electricity into your home to begin with. And that allowed, it was a fair proposition because you paid to make that electricity. You pay to ship that electricity to your neighbor because you pay for the poles and the wires through your minimum charges and all that stuff. The utility doesn't pay for any of that. And so all the utility is doing is acting as a facilitator. And so it makes sense that they just give you a credit equal to the amount that they charged your neighbor for the solar. They don't make any money for it. They don't lose any money. That's not how the utilities see it because they're a monopoly, right? They hate the idea that they have to pay you because they're like, no, we don't pay you, you pay us. And so over a period of many years, they lobbied the government very, very, very hard to get rid of net metering. And it was a big, 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 big fight. Over 200,000 people from across the state signed petitions to the governor and to the California Public Utilities Commission telling them, don't do this, don't get rid of net metering, don't make these changes. But the fix was in, and it could have been worse, but still, in April of 2023, these changes went into effect. So anyone who goes solar after that time, they when they have excess solar, and many of you who are there are on this new program that's colloquially called NEM 3, you don't get very much for that extra energy that you share back to the grid. You get like, maybe 7 to 11 cents for it. And in many cases, you get more like 3 or 4 cents, as opposed to like whatever the going rate is during the day, which is more like 20, 30 cents, that kind of thing per kilowatt hour. So this is called NEM 3. It's sometimes called the solar billing plan or the solar billing tariff. And since it's gone into effect, a lot less people go solar because it takes a lot longer now for a solar investment to pay back. We knew that that was going to be the case. That's in fact what happened. That's probably what the utilities wanted all along. We always believed that the CPUC's decision was made illegally, and in fact made in contrast to what the law says they need to follow. But we're not a legal shop. We don't have lawyers on staff. We're a grassroots group. Fortunately, the fight to stop them from doing this, we ended up working with a bunch of other organizations who do specialize in the law and lawsuits. And so there was three of those organizations that filed a lawsuit against the state of California, saying and making the case that the NEM 3 decision was made illegally. And and those three groups are the Center for Biological Diversity, the Environmental Working Group, and the Protect Our Communities Foundation. They filed that lawsuit almost immediately, just a few months after the NEM 3 went into effect in 2023. And it initially went to the Court of Appeal, one of the courts of appeal. That court rejected the lawsuit, not because they actually looked at what was filed, but they said that we don't have jurisdiction. We don't actually have any power to second guess a CPUC decision. They didn't say it exactly like that, but that was effectively what they said. And essentially, they were saying the CPUC is kind of above the law when it comes to our jurisdiction. We disagreed that the CPUC was above the law, and our allies who filed these lawsuits disagreed as well. So they appealed to the California Supreme Court. Last year, the California Supreme Court agreed with us that the CPUC is not above the law and clarified what is the standard for what's called judicial review of CPUC decisions and made that much, 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 much more stringent. And which is good. This is a long-term victory that regardless of how this lawsuit goes, it means that the CPUC can be subject to far more scrutiny from courts of law than they have been for many, many, many years. But in any event, back to kind of what we're talking about, the Supreme Court didn't rule on the merits of the case. They simply said the courts have to actually scrutinize the CPUC decision. So our allies then went back to the Court of Appeal late last year and refiled and basically said, you're now required to have to scrutinize our actual arguments as to why the CPUC acted illegally. And then I believe it was 2 weeks ago, the Court of Appeal came back and said, okay, we've scrutinized and we disagree with you and we're throwing out your lawsuit. So that's where things stand, is the Court of Appeal says that they looked at our arguments and they disagreed with them and they agreed with the CPUC. We have been saying, by the way, I think anyone that's been following the story all along, we said, don't hold your breaths that the courts are going to come in and save us. We tend to think that elites tend to protect their own and it's, kind of complicated and, government tends to protect government. Nonetheless, we feel like our case is very, very, very strong. And if you just look at the actual statute, California law regarding net metering, and what the CPUC is required to do when they revise net metering, it's very, very clear to us, at the very least, that the CPUC acted illegally. And when you look at the Circuit Court of Appeals decision, in our opinion, we think they really botched it. They did not take seriously the fact that you have to look at the statute itself, not the blah, 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 blah that the CPUC says, or the blah, 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 blah that some consultant says. You need to look at the law. And they just didn't seem to really take that as seriously as we did. The plaintiffs for the whole thing, again, the Environmental Working Group, Center for Biological Diversity, and the Protect Our Communities Foundation are trying to decide. What I've heard is, is it over? Or are they going to try to appeal again? We'll just have to wait for them. That they're the ones that have taken it this far, and we'll just have to see what they do. And in the meantime, as you'll hear for the rest of this, there's plenty of work for the rest of us little folk to be doing outside of judges and lawyers and other kinds of fancy stuff. And so we will carry on. And again, the one silver lining out of all this is we've got a very, very good, strong ruling from the California Supreme Court that clarifies that courts of law do indeed have the power and, in fact, some obligation to scrutinize CPUC decisions when a plaintiff believes that they acted illegally. And as crazy as that sounds, that's actually a victory in its own right. But the one last thing I'm going to say about this is I believe that the future of solar is solar and batteries. And we're going to get to a future, I think, soon enough as the price of batteries continues to go down, where you're not going to be sending much excess energy to the grid anyway. And when that day comes, the NEM3 will hurt a heck of a lot less. That day will not come a moment too soon. And so I believe our North Star is to make sure that the utility cannot stop you from making and storing energy at home. And in fact, as we're going to get into, the thing they desperately want to do is make it impossible for you to save money, even if you just make and store it at home. And so I believe that's the fight that we need to be really, really focused on, is the right to self-generate, to store, use all of that energy at home, and make sure the utility can't reach behind your meter and invade your privacy that way. Okay, so that is the update on the NEM3 lawsuit. I bet you there'll be lots of questions about that. So let's move on to then our campaign to stop the solar property tax. The rallying cry being no solar tax, not now, not ever. This is going to be the sixth time, I believe, in the last 6 years that we're fighting some kind of tax that someone in the government is proposing to levy just for putting solar panels on your roof. And so this is not our first rodeo. This is not, for many of you, your first rodeo. This is a picture of a rally, I believe, from 2020 through 2022, I believe, where we were stopping that incarnation of the solar tax that was on the table. And it was a huge undertaking that we did succeed in doing. So let's get into it. So right now, as it stands, current law has it that, and this has been the case for 40 years, the legislature has ensured that your property taxes will not go up if you put solar on your roof or a battery in your garage. That is the way it is right now. And we want to keep it that way. And however, if state lawmakers don't act this year now, then many California solar owners could face higher property taxes starting next year. And the reason why is because what the law says is there's what's called an exception. In other words, there has to be a proactive decision by lawmakers every couple of years to proactively say, if you put solar panels on your roof, if you put batteries in a garage, then your property taxes will not go up. And that's going to expire this year. The legislature now has to renew that protection. And this is the last year for them to do it. And if they don't, then many California solar owners could face higher property taxes starting next year in 2027. So let's describe what some of those situations might be. So if the legislature doesn't act now, you could be hit with a higher property tax in 2027 if you do one of these three things. If you have solar already, but you add a battery to your existing system in 2027. If you add more solar panels to your existing solar system in 2027 or beyond, or if you don't have solar on your roof right now and you install a brand new rooftop solar system, or if you're one of those folks who put in solar 20 years ago and you're getting rid of that system and putting in a new one, that too, that could trigger a property tax assessment. So basically, if you add a battery, if you add more panels, or if you put in a brand new system, you could be hit with higher property taxes starting in 2027 unless the legislature acts right now. we assume we're preaching to the choir here, but it's worth probably saying a solar property tax does not make any sense. Putting solar on your home doesn't add costs to your city or your county. In fact, the opposite is actually true. Rooftop solar reduces strain on the electrical grid, preventing blackouts and lowering costs for everybody. And a solar property tax is just going to make California's affordability crisis worse, and in the worst possible way, because the two things that are driving California's affordability crisis is the cost of housing and the cost of energy. And here you're going to have a double whammy property tax that's essentially making both more expensive. It's like the opposite of what the politicians are saying that they want to fight. And so all it's doing is just punishing people for doing the right thing. It's outrageous that this is even a possibility. But the life is outrageous sometimes, and so we fight. And so state lawmakers have to pass AB 2389. It's sponsored by an assembly member, Jackie Irwin. And by passing AB 2389, they stop the solar property tax. I know that sounds a little confusing, but just bear with us. This is just how legislation works. To stop a solar property tax, your legislators have to vote yes on AB 2389. And this is what the bill would do. It would extend the existing solar property tax exemption for consumers who install rooftop solar and storage systems that are less than or equal to 2 megawatts. So what that captures is your homes. It captures, apartment buildings and that have solar. It captures schools, libraries, food banks, churches. Those are all the kinds of solar that are like, 2 megawatts or less. So that's the first thing that it would do. And I basically just said this. It would extend this property tax exemption for all solar and storage systems sited on the property of public sector customers such as schools. So it acknowledges that among residential customers like yourself, that's assumed most of you will obviously get ensnared in this. But the bill acknowledges that schools could get hit by this as well, which is crazy. The government essentially raising taxes on schools for putting solar, it's just, you think about it. So the bill is clear-headed about that as well. And the other thing that it does is it gives local governments access to new tax revenue from solar farms. Because up to this point, the solar property tax exemption covered all solar, including like giant solar farms out in the desert. And there's been long agreement that like giant solar farms out in the desert, okay, that should probably be subject to some kind of property tax, assessment because there's more of an impact on local land use and that kind of thing. And so part of the compromise that this thing is going, let's protect the residential customers, the schools, the folks where putting in solar makes no impact on the city and the county, and where actually it has incredible amounts of positive benefit in the form of reduced cost on the grid. But let's also remove this exemption for giant solar farms and that kind of thing. And so cities and counties already with this bill are actually going to get a new source of revenue for those of them that are concerned about revenue. So that's what the bill would do. And the legislature has to pass AB 2389 to stop the solar property tax. And so we're asking all legislators to vote yes to stop the solar property tax. And so that's what that is. And then the path is basically you. You are the one that is going to make this happen. And we're going to emphasize this over and over and over again, is there's a bill. It's a good idea. Assemblymember Jackie Irwin is an awesome champion for her bills. She's a very, very skilled politician. She's very effective at what she does. She's very pro rooftop solar. So, we have a great champion who's leading this. And Senator Jerry McNerney is also a co-author on this bill and is also a very capable lawmaker. But honestly, folks, this is going to pass. It's going to be because of you. We know the utilities labor union are already bearing down on legislators and trying to cash in on all the campaign contributions that they make and the influence that they have. They're going to try to squash this bill. And the only thing that is going to stop them from squashing this is going to be your emails, your phone calls, your attending meetings that we're facilitating between you and your legislators. It's just going to be your voice. And many of you kind of go like, but does my voice matter? Honestly, your one voice, no, it doesn't. But your voice, along with the voices of all the other people in the Solar Rights Alliance network and beyond, the hundreds of thousands of people, yes, it does matter. It has mattered a bunch in the past. That's how we've stopped 5 other solar taxes, and it's how we can stop this solar tax from happening. So If you've already gotten on the stick, awesome. Thank you. There's more that you can do. We'll outline that at the end of the webinar. And if you haven't yet gotten around to taking action on this particular thing, please do. A lot of the follow-up materials we're going to be sending out are going to be exactly how you can do it, so fret not. But we can do this, and obviously it's very important. And thank you in advance for everything that you've done, and thank you for those of you who have already taken action for what you've done. So let's move on to plugin solar. Oh, sorry, and this is the URL. We're going to send this all out, and so don't worry about copying this right now. But this is the portal on our website. There's a one-stop shop that we have for every single issue that we work on that gives you all the information and all the ways you can take action. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Cailey for bringing balcony solar to California.
Sounds great. Thank you, Dave. And thank you everyone who's writing questions in that Q&A button. I am seeing them. If you're watching me type as Dave was talking, I'm collecting them to try to put them together into batches so that we're able to answer them. So if you haven't had a chance to ask your question, if you feel your question hasn't been answered yet by what Dave has said, please use that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to put your question there. So welcome again, and let's go ahead and transition over to balcony solar, sometimes called plug-in solar. Dave, will you go to the next slide here? This thing has taken off in other countries, especially Germany. In Germany, there are 4 million plug-in solar systems that are currently in use. And in that country, folks can just go to their local hardware store, buy one of these things, bring it home, plug it in, and boom, they're using the power of the sun to power their home. So what are these things? Let's go to the next slide. These are portable solar panels that can be hung from a balcony. They could be set out in a patio or leaned against a mobile home or placed in a yard. And then you just plug right into a wall outlet, just like a toaster, just as safely as a toaster. A single panel could save somebody about $250 a year. In Germany, these sell for about 230 US dollars. So at Germany's prices, this thing would pay for itself in about a year. We would not expect the prices to be that low in the US because there's no market for this. To get prices like that, we got to build a market. Lots of people have to get it. Supply, demand, prices will come down over time. But early bites of the apple show that prices for this would be something like 500 to 1,000, which means this would pay for itself in 2 or 3 years, even if it's not at Germany's prices. These are super easy to install. They set up just like a bookshelf, plug in just like a toaster. And if you have a patch of sunlight and an exterior outlet, this can help you lower your electric bills pretty immediately. Let's go to the next slide. So, like I said, they're pretty simple. They only have 4 main parts. They have a panel that's about the size of a refrigerator door. This is the same type of panel that many of you have on your roofs or ground mount systems already. And then it has a tripod or a bracket. The tripod is if you're putting it in a patio or a yard. The bracket is if you're connecting it to a balcony and hanging it off the balcony. And then it has an integrated microinverter that does the same job that your rooftop solar inverter does. First, it transfers the energy from the sun into electricity that your home can use. It also is the piece of this system that shuts the system down when the grid goes down, which ensures that line workers are never in danger. And then the last piece is a cord, just a regular cord that plugs into a regular exterior wall outlet. So one of these plug-in solar panels can power a refrigerator, a home computer, and a few lights. On a sunny day, you could use a couple of these panels to power a window unit air conditioner. Renters and homeowners alike can benefit from this technology, can use these panels to safely, cheaply, and easily reduce their electricity bill. But it has yet to truly arrive in the United States because it sits in this legislative gray area. The law isn't clear if they can be used, how they can be used, and we need clarity because, if we go to the next slide, it's got this incredible potential. But in the gray area, the utilities are trying to elbow their way in and say, no, 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 this little thing right here, we got to treat this sucker like a power plant. You got to get permission from us to use it. You got to pay a fee. We got to come out and look at it. This is what we have to do with this tiny little portable solar system. That's what they're trying to claim. So we know, if we can go to the next point here, That in just 4 years, Germany went from just a couple thousand of these plug-in systems to 4 million systems by paving the way with policy. And in our country, Utah was the first state to pass a plug-in solar law last year. We could be next with SB 868, the Plug into the Sun Act. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit about what this thing would do. So there's three things that SB 868 would do. First is it bakes safety right into the law. It requires that all plug-in systems be certified by a nationally recognized testing laboratory. Arguably, the most famous gold standard of these testing labs is UL, and they are already on the job. They have already developed a standard that manufacturers will have to follow. And after this webinar, I would encourage you to go look at your electronics in your home. Like this is my mouse, my Bluetooth mouse. On the bottom, you're gonna see the UL symbol or an equivalent symbol on just about everything. So just to give you a sense, these are the folks who make sure that stuff is safe for us to use as consumers, whoever we are, regardless of our technical know-how. So the other piece of this is that it also requires that balcony solars, again, prohibit electrons from flowing back to the grid during a power outage to ensure that the grid is safe. UL will require that anyway, but the law wanted to be really clear about it, to just say, no matter what, this is the safety piece we got to have baked in. Along with that is a new amendment that came into this bill just this past week that also says that these systems have to be registered with the utilities. And by registered, we don't mean getting permission. It would just be a simple portal where you tell the utility, that's like a web page. You just type in name, address, I have one of these things. That's it. And also that they have to comply with the National Electric Code and the California Electric Code, which UL would have insured anyway. So all of these things are a bit duplicative, but it's important to be really clear in the law that these systems need to be safe. So the whole kit and caboodle is tethered to UL and whatever UL decides is going to be safe. The second thing that this law does is that it limits the size of these systems to 1,200 watts, which is about 3 of these panels. Again, UL will have a size limit, but we wanted to be really clear. These should not be giant systems. They're not designed to cover someone's entire load. They're designed to allow some of your electrical needs to come from the sun and to be energy from the sun that powers your home to lower your electricity bill. That's the purpose here. So you're limited to 1,200 watts. So then the third part of the bill is this. As long as those two first safety requirements are met, then this says that consumers can use balcony solar panels, plug-in solar panels, without paying fees or getting permission from the utility. So this thing has incredible potential. And if we go to the next slide, again, as Dave said, this bill will pave the way for safe plug-in solar in California so that renters and homeowners can use this common sense solution to lower their electricity bills. And the path to passing this bill is exactly the same as the path to passing AB 2389, which is that your legislators need to hear from you. I want to pause here for a second and just say thank you. This bill has been around for a little bit longer than the property tax bill that Dave talked about. And so it has gotten a little farther in the legislative process, and we can see the results of your actions. Thousands and thousands of people have written to their legislators, have called their legislator's office, and then called again. Tons of you have lobbied directly with your elected officials. So you have raised your hand to say, I want to meet with my elected official. And you've done a training session to get ready for it. And then you've met with your legislator, with me or Dave in the room. And we've talked with the staff and the legislators who go to vote on these bills. And as a result, the current vote count stands at 14-0 in favor of SB 868, passing it through its first committee vote, which was the Senate Utilities and Energy Committee. And that is pretty remarkable and the direct result of you and also of the effort of the author and our coalition partners who are working together to try to get this thing across the finish line. So just enormous, enormous thank you to everybody that has taken action. One thing that Dave didn't mention, but that I do want to just let folks know about in case you're not familiar, is how a bill becomes law in California. So it starts in the House that originates the bill. In this case, SB That's the Senate. So it starts in the Senate, and generally it has to pass through a couple of committees, the committees that are focused on these particular issue areas. So in this case, the Senate Utility and Energy Committee. Then generally it's got to go through the Appropriations or Budget Committee, the group of legislators who are looking at whatever money might be involved in something like this. And then it goes to the full Senate floor for a vote. And then it repeats the process on the Assembly side. So one of the questions I actually saw come in that I just want to tackle right now is, am I reaching out to all my legislators about this? For the moment, we're focusing on the Senate for the plug-in solar bill and the Assembly for the property tax bill, because the property tax bill is starting in the Assembly. So it's going to go first to the Assembly Rev and Tax Committee, then Assembly Appropriations, then the Assembly floor, and then swap. So that's the process. And of course, if you have questions about this, again, please email us info at solarrights.org. And Dave, if you can pop up the URL here, this is the URL for the plug-in solar webpage, which has background on this, more images if you're trying to, get a handle on what is this thing. We got lots of images, we got videos you can take a look at to kind of get a sense of what this thing is, because this is new technology. All the pieces have been around for a long time, right? We've had solar panels, brackets, inverters, and cords, but putting them together into something you can just plug in and lower your bill with, well, that's new. So we've got resources there for you for that. We also have buttons to all the different ways to take action: a button to send a message, a button to make a call, a button to sign up, to lobby with your legislator. We got it all right there. Same thing with the property tax link that we flashed up earlier, and we'll make sure that we send these out as a follow-up to this presentation. So again, huge thank you to everyone who's taken action on this. As Dave said, if just one person makes the phone call, yeah, not so much. But if enough people call, enough people write, enough people lobby, and then we also had a group of people who came to Sacramento to stand up in the hearing and say, me too, I support this bill too. That makes a real difference, and we've seen that thus far. So these bills have a ways to go, but we're off to the races. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Dave, to take a look at our final sort of action items and wrap up here. And meanwhile, I'm going to scan the Q&A and make sure I haven't missed anything.
Okay, thank you, Cailey. Do we say thank you? Thank you. I mean, seriously, like, we cannot say this enough, that this whole thing works because of you and your voice and the voices of your neighbors and friends and family who you get involved in all this stuff. So big thanks. So what I want to do is just summarize the action items, and they apply to both property tax, stopping the solar property tax, and they apply to the plug-in solar fight. And in some ways, I'm keeping it generic for a reason, because this will almost always be what I think of as like the drill. This is like the secret sauce, although it's not so secret, about how a couple of 100,000 people can work together in a very, very systematic way to be able to overcome a powerful interest like the utilities. And so this is what they are. The first thing is always to send a written message to your representative, whichever one is the right one to be targeted, whether it's in the Assembly or Senate or both. And we make that easy through our website. Almost every time you see a take action button, that's the first thing that we have you do. You can do that on your own too by going to your representative's website, and they usually have a form that you can do to fill it out if you kind of want to just, do it in a more advanced way. You can honestly write them a written letter too. They read those. It all matters. But that first thing is like a written message to the representative. The second thing, though, is don't just stop at the written message. Take an extra minute and follow up with a phone call. On our website, after you send a written message, almost always we will redirect you to a page that shows you how to look up your representative's phone number and gives you a little script that you can use or you can modify when you make the phone call. It's like literally a minute, because the person on the other end who's answering the phone in your representative's office, they don't have a lot of time anyway. And so you don't need to be a lot, but the phone calls really matter. If you just send emails, that matters. But when they're coupled with lots and lots and lots of phone calls, that's when the representative office is like, okay, we need to pay attention. If that's all you do, then awesome. That's great. The third thing is what Cailey just said, is we will oftentimes, you'll see an email from us that goes, would you sign up to do a meeting with your representative's office or your representative themselves? This will almost always be over Zoom. If you're in the Sacramento area, you might see that sometimes we'll give you that extra opportunity, as I would call it, to come to SAC and do that in person. Please sign up for those if you can make the time. And because On top of the first two things, lots of emails and lots of calls. When they see even just a couple of you over Zoom talking in the way that you would authentically express your opinion on this stuff, it really starts to put a face to all the phone calls. And then that's when they're like, oh wow, people they care enough to actually like show up to these things because they know that nobody wants to do politics. Like they understand that. So when people bother to do even a little bit of politics, it really starts to resonate with them. So that's really the first three things I think of as like the drill, where you can make the time to do it. And obviously each one takes a little bit more time, but we try to make it as easy as possible. So even a meeting with your representatives, we will tell you what to do. And then obviously you will bring your own flair to the thing because that's really important. But we'll give you structure so that every step of the way you don't feel like you're groping around, not sure what you're supposed to do. We try to make this easy for you. The fourth thing is just to spread the word. And we try to give you as many ways as possible to spread the word. If you see that you have an idea about how to spread the word that we haven't suggested, let us know because we get lots of ideas from people like you and how to do it. If you're someone who just emails things around, that's great. If you're a social media kind of person, do it that way. If you like to post on Nextdoor, we usually provide a sample Nextdoor message. We've got videos on almost all of the social media platforms that you can send around, posts and things like that. So, and then if you want to actually just pass out flyers in your neighborhood, we'll send you flyers or we'll send you a PDF that you can print out, one or the other. But if you're kind of more old fashioned in that way, we got you covered there. But spreading the word is really, really important. And so, in whatever way that kind of makes sense for you to do. And then if you're part of an organization of some sort, a local, a church group, or a local conservation group or an environmental group or a club of some sort that might have an interest in the growth of rooftop solar, and you think your organization might want to lend their support for either one or both of these bills, we have letters that that organization can sign that actually has an impact on the legislature. In fact, we have been sending around a letter today that in support of the property tax bill that is signed by a very diverse group of organizations. It's got the consumer group CalPERG, it's got Third Act, and it's got the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, all in support of not raising property taxes on people who put solar panels on their roof. So it can be really powerful when not just solar owners are, beating the drum, but also other organizations. And it doesn't matter how small or how local. In fact, the smaller and more local, the better, because it shows legislators that people are really paying attention. So we've got letters that organizations that you're involved in can sign on to as well. Okay, so that's the drill. And if you do just one of these things, bless you, that's awesome. And if you do two of these things, that's also awesome. If you do all five of these things, that's awesome. You're awesome because, like we say, thank you. And I think we're ready for the Q&A, right?
I think we are. Let's go ahead and drop the slides. Well, first of all, the thank you again, just to everybody. You all are wonderful and fantastic. Also, some of you have said very sweet things in the Q&A. So you haven't so much written a question as just said something very nice. And I just want to also blanket say thank you for all the people that have done that. You are all so lovely. It is a joy to work with all of you on these issues. And thank you, Dave, for going over those action items. We will send those out. So if you're madly scribbling, we will make sure that we send out an email to everybody here and everybody who registered so that you have this information. So no worries there. Let's go ahead and stop the slides just so we can kind of zero in on the questions. Here we go. Okay, so I can see already that we're not going to be able to get to all the questions that have been asked. So I just want to reiterate, if you feel like my summary of your question or your question did not get answered in the next few minutes that we have, please send us an email. info at solarrights.org, and we would be happy to answer your question. Dave and I have a very serious zero email inbox policy, meaning it might take us a minute because there's two of us, but we will answer your emails. We will return your voicemails. So call us, email. Oh, thank you. People are saying such nice things. Dave can't see this right now, so I'm going to have to share this with him later, but you all are wonderful. So just to kick it off first, I think that one question I'm seeing a couple of different times here is about the amount of the property tax. Dave, can you talk about how much would it be? What are we talking about if you had a battery panels full system? And then I also see a thread. No one's asked it outright, but can you just also clarify whether or not it would be retroactive?
Yeah. Okay. So let's start there. So first, let's be really, really clear. If, and we don't plan for this to happen, but if the solar property tax starts in 2027, if we don't pass AB 2389, it is not retroactive. So it is not retroactive. Meaning if you put in solar or battery this year or earlier, you're good. That's grandfathered in. Also, your existing home value, all that stuff is protected. Your Prop 13 protections are still there. So they're not going to reassess your entire home. What would happen, what could happen, depending on your county, is let's say it's 2027, the protection has expired, and now there's a solar property tax. In 2027, if you put in a battery, what that could do is trigger an assessment on the battery, and then they would add that assessment to your property tax if you added a bunch of panels, or if you replaced your system with a brand new system, or if you didn't have solar at all and then you put in solar. The value of whatever it is that you put in 2027 and beyond will get assessed and then rolled into your property tax. The average property tax assessment rate is about 1.02 or 1.03%. It's bigger in some places, smaller in others, but that's the average. So if you want to get a sense of how much this could increase your property taxes by, you just take whatever you think the cost of the thing would be and multiply it by 1.03%, and then, just assume there's a little bit of this and that. So for example, a new rooftop solar system is between $30,000 and $40,000 in cash if you're paying cash. Okay. So now you have a sense of that's, another $300 to $400 a year that's going in. And it's not just for that one year, it's forever, right? So these are long-term investments. So you can think of it as like you're paying an extra $300 to $400 a year just for putting in solar panels, but also you're paying $8,000 over the lifetime. It's an $8,000 tax that you have to pay over the lifetime of that rooftop solar system. And again, for something that has no cost to the city and county and actually reduces the cost of the grid and prevents blackouts. And all you're trying to do is solve for the fact that the government has failed to regulate these utilities, has failed and failed. And so they failed, and you're trying to protect yourself, and then they're going to tax you anyway. So that's what that is. And, I think sometimes people have asked us, well, who's going to get hit the hardest with this? And it's like, that's not for us to decide. I think for a lot of people, I think we know that an extra $300 to $400 a year is untenable. They're barely hanging on as it is. So and as far as I'm concerned, a solar property tax of a dime is unacceptable for all the reasons that we've outlined. So they just shouldn't be there, and it certainly shouldn't be at that level. So no, not retroactive. Yes, it would be on the value of whatever it is that you put in, and you can kind of estimate that value and multiply it by 1% and change to get a sense of what that annual amount could be.
Thank you, Dave. And so it's just kind of riding on that. The question coming in here again, who are we contacting again for AB 2389? We're riled up, we're ready, we're prepared to say no solar tax. Who are we contacting again?
Yeah, and this will be clear in the materials we send out. So we've already emailed people about it, but it's like I have a hard time managing my
There's
own
a
email.
lot.
It's
Yeah,
like
there's a lot.
it's
This is a
like
good question. I'm glad somebody
yeah,
asked it because it's
but
like, okay, let's be really clear.
my wife was like, "Oh, I sent you an email about that." That was my wife, I was like, I think can you resend it, please?" So so you figure um, our button that you press for this is going to go to members of both chambers, both the Assembly and the Senate, because if you're going to do it once, we want to make it efficient for you, in case you only have time to do this once. But if you're trying to be a little bit more targeted for the property tax fight, you want to target your Assembly member. Okay. But again, you won't have to think too hard about that when you see the materials we send you, because the button will just send your message to both, and we'll encourage you to call both. And we might ask you later on down the road to do this again, because repetition is good. But initially, we'll say call both. But again, if you're trying to be really persnickety about this, right now, this is the property tax bill is in the Assembly, and so that's what you want to prioritize.
Thank you. And then just sticking with property tax for a minute here, there's a question about how AB 2389 would affect large businesses and data centers. So maybe we could go over the 2 megawatt threshold again, just to clarify who's protected, what's the compromise, what's happening here.
Yeah. So up to this point, the law has not distinguished between the sizes of solar systems that are going in. It's been a blanket exemption for any type of solar or battery that goes in including like large solar farms and that kind of thing. What the bill now clarifies is it would continue the protection against a solar property tax for solar and battery systems that are 2 megawatts or under. And to give you a sense of that, I have 46 panels on my roof. So actually a relatively large rooftop solar system on average. And that is, I believe it's like a 16 kilowatt system. So I'm well under the 2 megawatt threshold. Even though I have a relatively large solar system, it's just 16 kilowatts. But 2 megawatts is still not very big. 2 megawatts is like, you know, the biggest that would get to is like if your Target, if like a Target, or a Walmart had solar on their box store. And then, the next tier down would be like, uh, churches and libraries and schools also are pretty big systems, like maybe not as big as one that would go on top of a Target store, but schools are also pretty big. And in all these cases, these are good use cases of you're putting solar on the built environment. And when you put solar on the built environment, you know, there's no cost to the city or the county. And it all reduces the cost of the grid. It reduces blackouts. The more that customers of the utility make their own electricity, that's the case. Now, if data centers, a data center, if they put on something that was at 2 megawatts or below, then this bill would apply to them. If a data center put in a solar system of some sort that was bigger than that, it wouldn't apply to them. You have to draw the line somewhere. And the intent of that line, the 2 megawatt line, is to say a giant solar farm out in the desert that's like 100 megawatts or 50 megawatts, that's got to pay some property taxes because there's just more impact that's going on. There's a lot more, and it's also not servicing a particular user. It's a different animal altogether.
Switching over then to plug-in solar, balcony solar, we have sort of a batch of questions that are collectively asking, if I already have rooftop solar, can I also get balcony solar?
Yes. And bear in mind that um, if you're on NEM, well, most solar owners signed an agreement with your utility. And in the case if you're a PG&E customer or Edison or San Diego Gas and Electric, let's use that as an example, you are allowed to add 1 kilowatt more of solar panels to your existing system. If you add more than that, then you risk losing your net metering status. And so you're allowed to add a kilowatt. As it turns out, the sizing limits of the bill limits these systems to about a kilowatt anyway. So the answer is yes. Under your interconnection agreement, you could add a kilowatt of this, and that's pretty much what the law allows anyway.
So a natural follow-up to that question, can I go get one right now? Any variations on that theme?
Yeah. Um, you can get them. You could find these online on Amazon. You can. And there's a company called Brightsaver that is selling them in certain parts of the state. You can look them up. Those are not exactly what we're talking about here, though. So these are not UL certified products. The things that you find on Amazon are not UL certified, so use them at your own risk. And Brightsaver's product is not yet UL certified. It probably will be, because they're following this whole thing, but the UL thing is very, very new. Um, but lots of people do, and Brightsaver's panels are not exactly plug and play. They recommend that you put it on a dedicated circuit. Not everybody has a dedicated circuit. So that could be, an obstacle for you. But it's as close as you can get right now to what we're talking about. And so those would be your options is you could do something and go on Amazon, again, be careful, everyone. You could contact Brightsaver. And actually, I know a lot of people who have used Brightsavers, kind of like proto plug-in panels, if they have a dedicated circuit and they've been very happy with them. So you could look up that company. But really, no. For the most part, it's not something that you can really get in the plug and play way that we imagine it, where you could just put it into any old household, socket and just get it going. That's why we have to pass this bill. And so the sooner we pass this bill, the sooner you get your plug-in solar. So let's get moving.
Love it. Okay, so on this score, again, I'm paraphrasing, but hold on a second. You're telling me that an outlet can have one of these things send energy in addition to sending energy out? Tell us more about that, Dave. It's a good
Yeah,
question. We get this. This is the most commonly asked question, so I'm glad it's in here.
yeah. I asked the same question. I'm Kaylee, I imagine you might have also, is like, well, now wait a minute, wait a minute,
Hang on, just dang a
hold
second.
hold
You're telling
on one
me
second.
it went just like that, yeah.
But so, as it turns out, one thing that we have learned is something that many of you who are engineers, you're kind of like no duh, but the rest of us are just dummies, and so you just got to bear with us. Is electrons are like water. They're just like water. They just flow in whatever direction there are hungry mouths to eat it. Essentially, if you think about electrons as food and appliances and lights are hungry mouths, and so the solar panels make the electricity and the inverter turns them into something your household can use. And then as soon as you plug it in, then if there is a hungry mouth, essentially an appliance or a light on that's in the house that needs electricity, it'll just draw those electrons will just flow in that direction. So yes, that's how it works. It's pretty cool.
Excellent. And then kind of a follow-up question that I've seen a couple of people phrase a few different ways. So again, if you feel like your question is not being directly answered, please send us an email, but trying to smoosh a couple of these together. The question is essentially, do plug-in panels send electrons to the grid? And if so, do I get compensated for them? Is my meter affected? Does it spin backwards? Like, how does that part of things work? So for folks who have rooftop solar who are familiar with the idea that with a rooftop solar or a big ground mount array that's, would otherwise go on the roof, that when sunlight hits those panels, as you explained at the very, very beginning of this webinar, when the sunlight hits those panels, if there are extra electrons that are generated that, again, that the home is not hungry for, those do flow to the grid and you do get a bill credit. It depends what the bill credit is based on which program you are on, which program was available when you got solar. But how does it work for plug-in or balcony solar, Dave?
Yeah. So this is a two-part answer. And so part one of the answer is plug-in solar will rarely or never export energy to the grid. If the grid is down, it'll never send it because there's a feature in all solar panels, or really the inverter that's attached to the panel that just shuts the whole thing down when the grid is down. Which I think a lot of us solar owners are always kind of surprised about that but it's good. It's a safety thing, so that's good. There will be some instance, but also the reason why it's going to rarely, if any, send any extra energy back to the grid is that these are pretty small systems and your home uses a lot of electricity. And your home is going to use more electricity than these panels are going to cover. Um, there might be some instances, if you have a relatively small home and, it's one of those like spring days where you're not running either the AC or the heat, right? But it's sunny and the days are getting longer, so the panels are cooking and your refrigerator, it kind of cycles on and off. And they might get like a 15 or 30-minute interval where the refrigerator is actually cycled off and you don't have any other appliances running, but the panel's there. You might send a little bit of juice to the grid. The amount that you send is going to be is negligible, if at all. In some cases, you may never. In those rare cases, when you might send a little extra energy back to the grid, no, you will not get compensated for it. You will not get compensated for it by design, because the whole point of this bill is to say, we're going to make these plug-in panels safe, and as long as they are UL certified, then you don't have to get permission from the utility. You don't have to do any paperwork with the utility. The utility can't make you do any paperwork, other than like a simple registration. Um, you don't have to interconnect. You don't have to pay fees. They can't charge you fees. That's the bargain. What that means is if you send a little extra back to the utility, no, they're not going to pay you because you have no agreement with them. And I assume we all agree, yes, let's get the utilities out of our lives. And then you're not going to be sending very much, if any, back to the grid anyway.
One more question on plug-in, and then I'm going to move us in our just last couple of minutes here to just a few quick questions about things that are unrelated to either of these things. Can renters use plug-in solar?
Heck yeah. In Germany, where there's 4 million households approximately that are using these, a huge numbers of renters in apartments and just other rentals are using balcony solar. That's why they call it balcony solar, in fact, because in Germany, where there's lots and lots of apartment buildings, the use case that has become the most iconic is people are literally hanging them from their balcony. That's the photo that Cailey showed in the beginning. Um, so yeah, but obviously, if you're a renter in a single family home or a renter of a mobile home, same use case. You'll just need an outlet to plug it in, and obviously we need kind of all these other things to fall into place in order for this to work. So that's why we're working fast because we want to get this technology online and available. But if things go according to plan, the way that we want them to go, then a renter should be able to go into your local Walmart or Target or go online, buy a panel or two, plug it in, and immediately start to see some savings. And you're going to need an outlet and some kind of place that's relatively sunny. Is that going to work for everybody? No. Is it going to work for a heck of a lot of people? We think so.
Great. Okay. I wrote down a question I wanted to make sure we came back to because I've seen it in a few iterations. Dave, can you explain what NEM 1 and NEM 2 are and how somebody can know which NEM they're under? And this, folks, is going to be our last question for the evening. It's come up enough. I think we got to answer it. Of course, there are questions we weren't able to answer, so please email us with those questions. But Dave, why don't we take it away and then we'll bid everyone adieu after this answer.
Okay. NEM stands for net energy metering. Okay. So that's what it is, or net metering for short. So we'll just use NEM as our shorthand, but that's what we're talking about is net metering. Okay. So let's just start with like kind of a big dividing line. If you got solar after April 15th of 2023, you are not on NEM. You're on what's called the solar billing tariff. I know earlier we called it NEM 3. Honestly, that's a misnomer and we need to retire that name. It's, old habits die hard. If you got solar after April 2023, you're on the solar billing plan or the solar billing tariff. You're not on NEM. You're not on net metering. Okay. So this question is for people who got solar before April 15th of 2023. And there's two categories of people who are on NEM 1 and people who are on NEM 2. Roughly, this goes as follows. If you got solar, and I'm going to get my year a little wrong here. First off, just look at your bill because your bill will be the first place to tell you. So just look at your bill. It'll say you're on NEM 1 or NEM 2. It should. But if you got solar around 2016, you're probably on NEM 2. From 2016 to April 15th of 2023, you're on NEM 2. If you got solar before 2016 thereabouts, you're probably on NEM 1. And that was like the original version of net metering. The difference between NEM 1 and NEM 2, there are some differences, but there's not that much of a difference. The bigger difference is between all versions of NEM and the solar billing plan. And so that's how you know. And one other, just you didn't ask this question, but it's coming up, is if you are on NEM, any version of NEM, NEM 1 or NEM 2, you can stay on that net metering plan for 20 years from the date that they turned your system on. But just be careful. Don't add any more than a kilowatt to your system, because if you do, you're going to forfeit your net metering status. You can add a battery, add as many batteries as you want, but you'll forfeit that 20-year protection if you add more than a kilowatt of solar panels to your system. But otherwise, you're protected for 20 years. And I want to emphasize that because last year, if you were around, you knew that they tried to take that 20-year protection away. And you fought like a banshee, and we protected that. And so good job if you were around for that. So that was a hard-won protection. So hang on to it, folks, because you deserve it. So that's the answer. And if you don't, we'll reiterate this probably one more time or two more times before we adjourn. But if we didn't answer your question, or we tried to, but we botched it, or any variation of that, just email us at info@solarrights.org. We try to answer everything that comes in. So, and you don't have to be nice. You can just be like, you didn't answer it right, or whatever, and we're good. Like we're grown-ups. We want to help you understand.
Yes, and we're happy to answer your questions. And I know there were some questions that we didn't get to, so we're more than happy to. We also had a few people write in who just wanted to share their experience. We'd be happy to hear your story and respond to that too. So if you got something that's not a question, it's just a comment, you want to share it, have at it. info@solarrights.org. And yeah, Dave, go for it.
We love that because this
Yeah.
over here, these folks sent this photo. Their house burned down in the Paradise Fire in 2017. their ground mount, they're rural, their ground mount panels actually survived the fire. And so the photo, you can't really see it here, but like they when they rebuilt with those solar panels, and they were just like it's a symbol of for them of survival and rebuilding and resilience. And they wanted to send it. We love that stuff. I mean, it's just great to hear it. It's really inspiring. Yeah, so please do that.
Yes, I second exactly what Dave just said. And if you want to call us, you certainly can do that as well. We are happy to answer your questions over the phone. The phone number is 619-292-8740. And you'll also see, just because Dave mentioned this, in the voicemail message, there's an opportunity to tell us if you'd like to have your story shared on the Solar Freedom podcast. And we're always looking for great stories that we can share with the public to help people just get a better sense of what rooftop solar is, what it does, how it helps people, who rooftop solar users are. So if you're interested in that, please give us a call. And again, please reach out, info@solarrights.org. And thank you so, so much, everybody, for being here this evening. We are at 7:04, so we're going to wrap up, but it's been really wonderful to be here with all of you. Your questions and your very kind words are fantastic. Thank you for everything you do. And I'll hand it over to you, Dave, for the final word here. But again, thank you, everyone.
The final word is you have the right to defend, to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference from the utility or the government. But freedom isn't handed over; it's fought for over and over again. So keep at it. You're doing a great job. It's a blessing and a pleasure to work with all of you. And onward we go.
Thanks, folks. Have a nice night.